I knew that that was an acceptable number for a bribe. I had heard that was the right amount to bribe a police officer, so I... Hey there, and welcome to Car Stories with Matt. In 2006, I met my wife, who is Filipino, who lived in the Philippines at the time, and we basically carried on a long-distance relationship for a while, and we got married in late 2006. And I started trying to process paperwork to bring my wife to Canada. This proved to be pretty challenging at the time, and at some point I got frustrated with the whole process and decided I would instead move to the Philippines. So in 2008 I went to the Philippines. I had already kind of prepared ahead of time, and I had sent some money ahead to kind of get things going there and arranged so that we could start basically a business there and start start a life there together. And so one of those things that we bought ahead of time was a vehicle. And in the Philippines they have these little Suzuki mini trucks. They actually have a lot of different brands of mini trucks, and they're brought over from Japan. We have some in Canada, and you've probably seen them in the US too. But basically these Japanese surplus mini trucks, and they're about the most affordable vehicle you can buy in the Philippines, and they're pretty practical because they're small and they're great for getting through traffic there. So we went ahead and bought that just prior to me going to the Philippines. Some family members there checked it over and everything. So when I got there, I already had this vehicle. It's like a 93 Suzuki mini truck, and just a two-wheel drive, 4-speed, and it had air conditioning, which not all of them do, but it did. Pretty cool little mini truck. It was quite a novelty. Learning to drive it. I'm a little too big to drive one. I have really long legs, and we actually had to move the gas pedal a little bit and stuff just so I could drive it comfortably. But man, was it ever fun to zip through traffic in. And if you've never been to the Philippines, the traffic there works quite a bit differently than it does in North America. Basically there are no fixed road rules, and basically the person with the most guts goes first. But it's not really like a pushy type scenario. People are actually really polite and courteous about it, and so basically you never have to wait. It's kind of nice once you get used to it. You can basically nose your way into a traffic jam anywhere. If you can get a nose of your car started in there, people will make room and let you in there. Even if you go to pass somebody in the Philippines and there's oncoming traffic and there's not enough room, all the vehicles will move over, and 3 cars will just meet in the road. If you're on a motorcycle, it's quite acceptable to pass in the walking lane or pass on the center line, that kind of thing. That's how you drive there, and once you get used to it, it's actually kind of fun, and it's not really stressful like you'd think or anything like that. And so that was my introduction into driving there, was driving that little mini truck around, and I got used to zipping through tight spaces really quickly. You zip between cars with just inches to spare there and stuff, and you can drive as quick as you can go. That's the cool thing. If you want to sit there and pass people, and I got quite a reputation in the area because there wasn't really any other white guys around, so I kind of stood out there, and then that combined with my aggressive driving style earned me quite a reputation in the area as a crazy driver. But I always wanted an owner type vehicle, and what an owner type vehicle is in the Philippines is basically a local built vehicle that's built out of salvage parts from other vehicles. So like if a vehicle is impounded in the Philippines or whatever, and it gets seized, then those parts all get sold off and made into other cars. And so a lot of these owner type vehicles are made to look like a factory vehicle, and so I eventually bought one, and the one that I bought was meant to imitate a Toyota Tamaro, they call it, which is a large passenger vehicle. It's like a suburban type thing, basically, like a large passenger SUV. And these are crudely built vehicles. Like the body panels are all hand beat with a hammer, and you know, they're not perfect, you know. And this one was an older one. It had been built in the early 90s, and I believe it had been used as public transportation, because a lot of the public transport there is owner type vehicles, like the jeepneys. A jeepney is like a public transit bus, but it's all homemade as well. And so that's what I bought, because we were raising hogs there. I have some experience with pigs, and so that's what we chose to do there as a business, was raise hogs. And we also had a little feed store where we sold hog feeds and stuff, and that allowed us to get a cheaper price on the feeds we were buying for our hogs. So we were always hauling a lot of stuff, and so that's why I basically upgraded to this owner type vehicle, because it was a lot bigger than the mini truck. And now that I was used to driving in the traffic and whatnot, I was okay with the bigger vehicle. So we got this one, and it was really dilapidated when we got it, and I, you know, did some work to it. I ended up, it had some bent push rods and wasn't running right, and needed a new carburetor and a few things. But eventually we got this thing running good, and I brush painted it and put the name of our little shop on the side of it. We called it the Pig Shop, our store. And so it was like our company vehicle. And it had a Toyota 1.8 liter slant 4 in it. It's called a 7K engine. That's the common power plant there. Toyota's like the big brand in the Philippines. That's like what GM is in America. And so that's what most of the owner types have. Like they have 3K engines, 4K engines, 5K engines, and then 7K engines. So this was actually quite a current engine for an owner type vehicle, because most of them use a 3K or a 5K, which is an older and smaller engine. But you know, this one had seen better days. But anyways, once we got it running pretty decent, and it had 5-speed, and it's a pretty torquey engine, so it worked pretty good for driving around there. And like, this thing was such a piece of junk. I remember we were driving down a rough road in it one day, and heard this horrible noise under the hood, so I instantly shut it off. Like, it sounded like something was in the fan. Popped the hood, and sure enough, something was in the fan. The battery box had broken loose, and the whole battery and box fell into the fan blade. So strapped that up out of the way, and got it to a friend's house, and he welded that all up. And then another day I was driving along, and I went to grab 5th gear, and the shifter just broke off in my hand. So for a while I was driving with just a little nub sticking up out of the transmission there. There was another time we were driving, and this vehicle had a really good ground clearance. It had big wheels on it, and it had like 1.5 feet of ground clearance. So we're driving down this really rough, kind of washed out road in the rain, and there's really deep puddles and craters everywhere in the road. It wasn't affecting me any, but there was this couple on just a young couple on a scooter riding along, and they ended up going astray and went right off the road, and they were sunk right up to the belly of the scooter in mud, and it's just pouring rain. And the funny part is, like, Filipinos are so good-natured, and so they were just laughing. They got stuck in the mud and they just burst out laughing, and they were just sitting there laughing at their situation, and we were laughing at their situation, and that's kind of the part that I really enjoyed about driving there, is there's a lot less tension, and people are, I don't know, just maybe it's because it's warm there and it's a tropical climate, but people seem to be in less of a rush and generally in a better mood. So, you know, it leads to a lot more enjoyable driving experience. I did have a motorcycle there actually as well that I rode quite a bit. It was a 125cc Kawasaki, and that was a lot of fun. A 125 there is pretty quick because they don't have like emission regulations and stuff, so they're not detuned like the ones that you would get in North America that are tuned for California emissions. Normally these ones are just, you know, like the old bikes from the 70s or whatever, where a smaller cc means a lot more power than it does nowadays. And so this bike was pretty awesome. I could catwalk it and whatever, and so I got to the point where I rode pretty aggressively on that. I remember one time I was selling some hogs, and I had to give the hog dealer a ride for whatever reason back into town, and I'm doing my usual, doing about 70-80 kilometers an hour through the heavy traffic on this rural road. I mean, there's the other traffic on the road is moving at like 20-30 kilometers an hour, you know, like 10-15 miles an hour, and I'm smoking along at like 50 mile an hour here. And I used to ride the center line a lot and just kind of weave through the traffic on the center line. A lot of people do that there, and it's kind of funny because I have this Filipino on the back, and I mean, Filipinos are pretty well born on motorcycles. You'll see like 5 of them on like some little scooter, and they got like a baby stuck up on the handlebars, and I mean, that's how they ride there. They have no fear of motorcycles. But this guy, he's on the back, and he's like, really, you know, I'm not in much of a hurry, and stuff like this, and he keeps tapping my shoulder to try and get me to slow down, and I'm just giggling because really, there was another time where I never wore a helmet either, because I mean, nobody wears a helmet there. I wore a t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops to ride a motorcycle there, and it's so hot that feels really refreshing. So I was actually delivering a bag of chicken feed to a place, because we sold chicken feed as well. So a 50-kilo sack of feed, which is 110 pounds, I had that strapped on the back of the bike and heading there to deliver it. We made deliveries to this particular customer about once a week, and anyways, heading out there, and there's a check stop, police, and they were checking for helmets, which was crazy because nobody wears a helmet. But if you've ever heard that in the Philippines you can bribe police officers, I can tell you firsthand you can. And that's basically what this was. It was like a Sunday afternoon where there would never be a check stop for any logical reason, but these guys were just, these police officers were out making some extra money on the weekend, and I was one of the people they pulled over and threatened me with a 2,100 peso helmet ticket, which I don't know what that is in Canadian dollars. I think it's like $50 or something. Anyways, by this point I was living and working as a Filipino, so that was a lot of money to me. You know, I didn't have money coming from Canada or anything, so I was living off what I was making. So I had a 100 peso bill in my wallet, and I knew that that was an acceptable number for a bribe. I had heard that was the right amount to bribe a police officer, so I offered. I said, would this make you forget that I was not wearing a helmet? And he's like, no, I'm not interested in that. But I guess when I opened my wallet, he noticed I also had a 500 peso bill in there. And so as I'm putting 100 back in, he's like, I'll take the 500. So I'm like, okay, so passing the 500 and off I go. And by the time I came back down the road, about 20 minutes later, with a helmet on, because I sidetracked home and I did have a helmet. I grabbed a helmet. We used helmets if it was raining to keep the rain out of our eyes. That was their purpose in the Philippines. But I put one on in case he was still set up there, and he was already long gone. Another interesting vehicle that I drove while I was in the Philippines is my father-in-law's Jeep. Unfortunately, my father-in-law has since passed on, but at the time he had this owner-type Jeep, and that's one of the most common owner-type vehicles is Jeeps. They try to replicate a Jeep Wrangler, and some of them are so close that you can't tell them from a real Jeep Wrangler, right down to the point where they'll put the Jeep stamping mark in the fenders and everything. Some of them are just amazing. But the one he had wasn't. It wasn't like a close replica. It was just that style of a vehicle, like a Jeep, and so we called it a Jeep, and it actually had a Isuzu diesel engine in it, like a 4-cylinder Isuzu, and a Toyota 5-speed transmission. And that vehicle was pretty cool to drive. It was really dilapidated, and like all the suspension was worn out and would rattle. And one of the unique features to it is it would turn really sharp one way, but it would hardly turn the other way. So when you were maneuvering it, you always had to kind of plan on turning it. I think it was to the right that it would turn really sharp. And it was super low geared. Like it would probably only do about 35 mile an hour flat out. Like, you know, like 60 kilometers an hour, something like that. But it was, you know, it had so much torque, and with this diesel, it would just fly. Like if you were passing somebody, and the diesels there, they sound really mean. I mean, this thing was like straight piped, and it's just when you step on it, it made one heck of a ruckus, and it would fly. Thanks a lot for tuning in to Car Stories with Matt. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have yourself a great day.